Nobody tells you this. And honestly, that's exactly why so many people get blindsided. You spend years, maybe decades, grinding toward one goal, paying off your house. You imagine that final payment like it's the finish line of a marathon. Freedom, relief, no more stress, no more debt hanging over your head. You picture the moment clearly. You log into your account, hit that last payment, and just sit there smiling. Maybe even a little emotional, because you did it, something most people never actually achieve. And for a moment, it feels exactly how you imagined. Hi, my name is Brinny, and I spend way much time thinking about why people who look financially reckless are sometimes better prepared for disaster than people who did everything right. If you've ever felt vaguely unsettled about how dependent your entire financial life is on one company, subscribe and hit. Then something strange happens. Nothing changes. No fireworks, no dramatic shift in your day-to-day life, no sudden feeling of being rich. In fact, for a lot of people, there's this quiet, unexpected feeling that creeps in. Wait, is this it? Nobody talks about that part, because we're all taught to believe that paying off your house is the ultimate financial victory, the dream, the milestone, the thing that will finally make everything feel secure and complete. But the reality, it's way more complicated. At first, there's definitely relief. That monthly payment that used to dominate your budget is gone. It's like suddenly having extra breathing room you haven't felt in years, maybe decades. You check your bank account and realize you actually get to keep more of your money now. That's when the first shift happens. You start asking yourself a question you've never had to seriously consider before. What do I do with this extra money? Because before, it was easy. The mortgage decided for you. A huge chunk of your income had a purpose every single month. There was structure, there was discipline built in. Now, that structure disappears overnight. And here's the part nobody warns you about. Without that forced discipline, a lot of people drift. Some start spending more without even noticing, small upgrades here, a few extra subscriptions there, eating out more often, buying things just because they can. It doesn't feel reckless, it feels deserved. After all, you worked hard for this, right? But over time, that extra money doesn't feel so extra anymore. It quietly gets absorbed into a new lifestyle, and suddenly you're not as far ahead as you thought you'd be. Then comes the second shift, and this one hits deeper. Your sense of purpose changes. For years, your financial life had a clear mission: pay off the house. Every decision, every sacrifice, every plan was built around that goal. Now that it's gone, there's a weird kind of emptiness. Not sadness exactly, more like a lack of direction. Because humans are wired to chase goals. We need something to move toward. And when that big long-term goal disappears, it can leave you feeling unanchored. Some people fill that gap with new goals: investing, building wealth, early retirement. Others, they don't. They just kind of coast. And that's where things start to get interesting. Because paying off your house doesn't automatically make you financially secure. That might sound crazy, but think about it. Yes, you don't have a mortgage anymore, but you still have property taxes, insurance, maintenance, repairs, utilities. The house doesn't stop costing money just because you own it outright. In fact, sometimes those costs feel even more real now because there's no big mortgage payment overshadowing them. Every expense stands out. A new roof? That's on you. Broken HVAC? You're writing that check. There's no lender involved anymore, no buffer. It's all yours. And that leads to another realization people rarely talk about. Your house is not cash. It might be your biggest asset, but it's not something you can easily use in everyday life. You can't buy groceries with your walls. You can't pay bills with your driveway. Unless you sell it or borrow against it, that wealth is locked away. So even after paying off your house, you might still feel financially tight. And that confuses a lot of people, because they thought this moment would feel completely different. Then there's the psychological shift. For years, you've been living with a certain level of pressure, a constant underlying awareness that you owe a large amount of money. Even if you're comfortable, That pressure is always there in the background. When it disappears, it's almost disorienting. You wake up one day and realize no one can take your house from you for missing a mortgage payment. That fear is gone. And that's powerful. But it also changes how you think about risk. Some people become more conservative. They've achieved something significant and they don't want to jeopardize it. Others go the opposite direction. They feel invincible. They think, I've got no mortgage. I can handle more risk now. And that can lead to decisions they wouldn't have made before. Starting businesses, making big investments, taking on new kinds of debt. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. But either way, it's a shift. And then there's something even more subtle, something almost nobody talks about. Your identity changes. For years, you've been someone paying off a house. It's part of how you see yourself, responsible, disciplined, working towards something meaningful. When that's gone, you have to redefine who you are financially. Are you now an investor, a saver, a spender, someone preparing for retirement? It sounds small, but it matters more than you think, because your identity shapes your decisions. And if you don't consciously redefine it, you can end up drifting without realizing it. Now here's where things take an unexpected turn. For some people, paying off their house actually slows down their wealth growth. That sounds completely backwards. But here's why it happens. Before, they were focused, structured, disciplined. Afterward, they relax. They stop optimizing, stop planning, stop pushing. They think, I made it. And in a way, they did. But financially, that mindset can be dangerous. Because the game doesn't end when the mortgage is gone. It just changes. The people who truly benefit from paying off their house are the ones who understand that. They take that freed up money and put it to work. They invest it, build assets, create income streams. They replace the mortgage payment with something productive. And over time, that's where the real transformation happens. Not in the moment you pay off the house, but in what you do after. Because that's the part nobody tells you about. The finish line you've been chasing, it's actually a starting line, a completely different phase of your financial life. One where you have more control than ever before. More flexibility, more options, but also more responsibility. No structure, no automatic plan. It's all on you now. And that's both exciting and a little intimidating. Some people thrive in that environment. Others struggle. Not because they're bad with money, but because they were never taught what comes next. We spend so much time talking about how to buy a house, how to finance it, how to pay it off. But almost no one talks about what life looks like after. And that's the real story. Because paying off your house doesn't magically solve everything. It doesn't automatically make you wealthy. It doesn't guarantee financial freedom. What it does is give you an opportunity, a powerful one. But like any opportunity, it can be wasted or it can be maximized. And the difference comes down to awareness. Understanding that this moment isn't the end of the journey. It's the beginning of a new one. So if you ever reach that point, if you make that final payment and sit there expecting everything to feel different, just know this. The real change doesn't happen in that moment. It happens in the weeks, months, and years that follow. In the choices you make. In how you use your freedom. In whether you drift or take control. Because nobody tells you this, but paying off your house isn't what changes your life.
And that's where things quietly start to separate people. Because two people can reach the exact same milestone and end up in completely different places 5 years later. One person feels lighter, more in control, steadily building wealth without stress. The other, still wondering why it doesn't feel like enough, still feeling like something is missing, still chasing a feeling they thought this would give them. And the difference isn't income, it isn't luck. It's what happens in the invisible moments right after the celebration fades. Because here's the truth that almost nobody says out loud. For years, your life had tension. Not bad tension, useful tension. Deadlines, payments, a reason to stay disciplined. A system that forced consistency whether you felt like it or not. And that system worked. It kept you moving forward, even on days when you didn't feel motivated. But now that system is gone. No due date, no obligation, no consequence if you don't pay yourself the same way you paid your mortgage. And that's where most people slip. Not in a dramatic way, but slowly, almost invisibly. Because discipline without pressure is a completely different skill. Before, you had external pressure. Now it has to come from within. And if you don't build that internal system, something strange starts happening. You lose momentum. Not all at once, not in a way that alarms you, just little by little. You stop tracking things as closely. You stop thinking long-term as often. You start living more in the present, which sounds great, until you realize it's costing you your future. And this is where people get confused, because on the surface, everything looks fine. No debt, stable life, comfortable routine. But underneath, there's no growth, no direction, no intentional movement. And over time, that creates a different kind of stress, a quieter one. The kind that shows up late at night when you start wondering if you're really making the most of where you are. Because deep down, you know, you didn't work all those years just to stand still. You worked for freedom. But freedom without direction can feel a lot like drifting. And drifting doesn't feel good for long. So eventually, one of two things happens. You either wake up and take control, or you stay comfortable and slowly fall behind without even realizing it. Now here's where things get even more interesting. A lot of people think that once the house is paid off, their expenses drop dramatically. And yes, your biggest payment is gone, but something else quietly rises to take its place. Your tolerance for spending. Because when you feel like you've made it, your standards start to shift. You upgrade things. You justify purchases more easily. You think, I don't have a mortgage anymore. This is fine. And each decision by itself seems small, harmless even, but stacked together, they rebuild the exact same financial pressure you just spent years eliminating, just in a different form. And now, instead of one predictable payment, you have dozens of smaller ones pulling your money in different directions. Subscription, upgrades, conveniences, little comforts that slowly become expectations. And before you know it, the space you created is filled again. That's one of the biggest traps. Not debt, but lifestyle inflation disguised as reward. And it's incredibly easy to fall into because it feels earned. You don't feel irresponsible, you feel justified. But the result is the same. Less freedom, less flexibility, less control. And this is the moment where awareness becomes everything. Because if you catch it early, you can redirect. You can decide consciously that the money you freed up won't disappear into habits that don't move your life forward. You can choose to keep your lifestyle steady and let your wealth grow instead. That's when things start to change in a real way. Because now you're not just debt-free. You're building something. You're creating momentum again. But this time, it's self-directed. And that's a completely different level of power. Imagine taking the exact amount you were paying every month and investing it. Not once, not occasionally, but consistently, month after month, just like before. Same discipline, same commitment. But now, instead of paying off a liability, you're building assets. That's when the game shifts. That's when time starts working for you instead of against you. And slowly, almost quietly at first, your financial life begins to transform in a way that paying off your house alone never could. Because the real advantage wasn't just eliminating debt, it was proving to yourself that you could commit to something long-term, that you could be consistent, that you could follow through even when it wasn't easy. And if you apply that same mindset to building wealth, that's where things become exponential. But again, nobody really explains it like this. Most people treat paying off their house like the final chapter. They relax. They stop pushing. They assume the hard part is over. And emotionally, that makes sense. But financially, that's where the biggest opportunity actually begins. Because now you have something rare. Margin, space, control over a large portion of your income. And if you use that intentionally, you can create a level of security and freedom that goes far beyond just owning your home. But if you don't, that opportunity slowly fades. Not because you did anything wrong, but because you didn't do anything on purpose. And that's the quiet danger. Not failure, but passiveness. Because life will always find a way to use your money if you don't give it a clear direction. It will always fill the space. So the real question isn't what happens after you pay off your house. The real question is, who do you become after you pay off your house? Do you become someone who coasts, someone who enjoys the moment but slowly loses momentum? Or do you become someone who takes that freedom and turns it into something bigger, something lasting? Because that choice, right there, is what determines everything that comes next. And here's something that might surprise you. The people who build the most wealth after paying off their house aren't necessarily the ones who earn more. They're the ones who keep acting like they still have something to prove. Not to others, but to themselves. They don't let comfort make them complacent. They don't let freedom turn into laziness. They respect the position they've earned, and they use it. And over time, that compounds into something powerful. Because now, they're not just stable, they're growing. They're not just secure, they're expanding their options. And eventually, they reach a point where money isn't a source of stress at all. Not because they paid off their house, but because they understood what to do after. And that's the part that changes everything. Because once you see it this way, the goal isn't just to eliminate debt, it's to build a life where your money works harder than you do, where your decisions are intentional, where your freedom actually leads somewhere. So if you're on that journey right now, if you're still making those monthly payments, still working toward that moment, just remember this: paying off your house is not the end of your financial story. It's the moment where you finally gain control of the pen.
So when that day finally comes, when you make that last payment and sit there in silence, staring at the screen, realizing it's over, don't just celebrate it. Understand it. Because that moment isn't powerful for what it takes away. It's powerful for what it gives you. Control. And most people don't know what to do with control. They wait for life to tell them the next step. But this time, there is no next step unless you create it. No system, no pressure, no one forcing you forward. Just you and your choices. And that's where your real life begins. Not when the debt disappears, but when the excuses do. Because now every dollar you earn has a direction you choose. Every move you make builds something or wastes something. Every year that passes either multiplies your freedom or slowly shrinks it. And you won't notice it day to day, but one day you'll look back and realize exactly which path you took. That's why this moment matters so much more than people think. Not because you paid off a house, but because you proved you can do something hard for a very long time. And if you don't carry that same mindset forward, then all you did was finish a chapter without ever reading the rest of the book. So don't stop here. Don't slow down. Don't let comfort turn into complacency. Take that same discipline, that same consistency, that same focus, and aim it at something bigger. Because the truth is, the people who win financially aren't the ones who just get out of debt. They're the ones who keep going after they do. And years from now, when everything around you looks different, when your life has more freedom, more options, more peace, it won't be because you paid off your house. It'll be because you understood what that moment really meant, and you didn't waste it.